Happy New Year! Happy New Year. Today is our annual prediction day. We're going to talk about what's coming up in 2023. Keith, in all of his brilliance, knows all the answers. So enjoy this episode of Hollywood Breaks, and happy birthday, Lydia. Hey, happy New Year's Eve, Keith.
Indeed. Happy New Year's Eve.
Do you know what's happening today on this 30th of January, 2020?
How about December?
Let me start over.
Why start over? Just roll with it, man. Come on.
What I mean is December 30th.
Okay.
Am I already in January? My brain is all over this. It's Lydia's
We'll fix
birthday.
it in post. We'll fix
Lydia
it in post, Tim.
turns-
Don't worry.
Lydia turns 49 today.
Wow,
Can you believe it? 49.
That's unbelievable.
Years old.
49. She doesn't look a day past 25.
Yeah. No, exactly. I don't know what it is. The Moldovan skin is incredible. And I think she's taken after
Something in the water. It's something in the water, Tim. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
It's something in the
for
water.
sure. So happy 49th birthday, Lydia. Cheers to
Indeed.
you. Next year's the big one. We're excited.
Cheers. It's half a century old. Good for her.
All right, so let's kick out this episode. This is our end of year annual prediction episode, which is our first annual, because I'm going to guess we said something last year, but I didn't look back. But so let's make this up.
I didn't either. I don't know how accurate we were, but I'm sure we were spot on because we're just so
everything I thought was going to happen, but I can remember totally happened. But it's interesting to think about all the changes that can take place in a 12-month period. We kind of been talking about that last couple of weeks, and really Hollywood has this ability to respond to pop culture, have to put things out that create pop culture, and then they have to run businesses. They have to kind of keep the machine going through all the thick and thin. And the economy has a major effect on entertainment.
Yep.
Where people go, how they want to consume things, what devices come out. It's such an interesting industry that we're part of. So 2023 is coming right up, and I want to sit here today and tell people we know what's happening. Keith's inside scoops really are feeding us, and we absolutely know the inside of what's going on in Hollywood. Wouldn't you agree, Keith? Come on.
Of course. Brilliant. We all know this. I mean, we're 115 episodes in. I mean, come on, that brilliance doesn't, come around that often. So you got to enjoy it while you can.
We are known experts in our field. All right, so let's 2023. Look at, I know one thing that's going to happen in 2023. The writers are going to go on strike, right? It's time for renewal. There is so much media out there. The landscape has changed. Technology has changed. These writers are going to go on strike. And the last time they went on strike, reality TV was created from their strike. So there's going to be a big push coming out of this writer strike.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Fox. I remember it when it happened. And obviously there was a certainty of worry, particularly amongst some of the employees, that, oh, okay, does this mean we're all going to get laid off because there's no product to market? But luckily, the studio had thought ahead and saw it coming, so they, ramped up a lot of scripts, so they had stuff ready to go in production during the strike. I don't know if that's the same situation today. That I would imagine they're probably stockpiling scripts in preparation for the inevitable slowdown, work stoppage. I mean, I think it's definitely a possibility. The writers have a lot of complaints. I've been hearing and reading a lot about writers' rooms that are just overworked, working nonstop. The seasons have, funny enough, the seasons have gotten shorter, but there's a lot more demanded of them, and the way that sort of the streamers have been structuring it so they don't have to pay out as much is causing a lot of writers to burn out. And it's also, you have these big deals with like the Ryan Murphys of the world that get these giant deals with like Netflix, and then that doesn't leave a lot of money downstream for, the actual writers. So there's a lot of, details that have to be worked out. I think the directors have already started negotiating with the studios. So they're usually the first ones out of the gate. They're usually the least controversial, and they usually get a solidified deal fairly quickly now. And then sort of writers and SAG follow shortly thereafter. But it'll be interesting to see, because I think everyone's kind of looking to the writers because they went after the agents the agencies with their packaging not too long ago, a few years back. And that really kind of worked out in the writers' favors because most of the agencies agreed to get rid of packaging deals and stop them. So that worked in their favor. So we'll see if that continues into this year. I think it's going to be a tenuous year. I think a lot of people are going to be walking a tightrope. I think the big question for the writers is, given where the industry is right now, where, you know, theaters are basically barely keeping the lights on, you know, there is a lack of product in theaters, and then you have the streamers where the quality is questionable.
Streamers have consumed so much of the content.
So
to me, there's like a heavy deficit. Not only did the consumers, it feels like the streamers consumed every good piece of content and also every bad piece of content that was out there. But then they had a cash crunch too early in the system here, so that stockpiling of scripts had to take precedent over other items, or they actually didn't have the money to stockpile scripts. So
I mean, it's one of those things where it's tough, because if the writers do strike, what does that mean for the industry? It's tough to say. Like you said, the last one basically led to this boom in reality TV. We could be seeing another boom of reality TV. Who knows? Or
the streamers. I believe the streamers have to go live. That's what I think, because the streaming services can't stockpile content the way they've been doing it through writing, directing, producer, and then just have some long play model. We're gonna have to turn on a live feed and let live feed come in, and we're gonna be watching like congressional hearings on Netflix, because it's the only thing they're gonna be able to afford, and it's happening all day.
This is where it's gonna get interesting. So it'll be interesting to see, because Netflix is, as I think I've mentioned, is doing their Chris Rock live, their first live show with Chris Rock right around the Oscars, which I think is so on point for Netflix. And he's doing a live show. So if that goes off and is a huge hit, then you're absolutely right. You could totally see like the Netflixes and the Apples and the Amazons all like diving in. I mean, Amazon's already playing with the football, and Apple's been playing with baseball, but actual live entertainment that aside from sports, we could see sort of a boom in that as well.
Well, I can tell you one thing for certain: when there's a writer strike, I'll say the last writer strike, traffic in Hollywood was awesome. No one was going to work. So for the writer strike, there's more green lights in Hollywood. It's
unless Tim, they are protesting at Nakatomi Tower, which is what happened the last time at the writer strike. I was at the lot.
If you're going
and they were surrounding Nakatomi Tower, which is how I got into the lot. So there was I had to go out like the main gate, and it was a little convoluted, but anyway.
Not if you're going into actual Hollywood, you're coming over Hill, 101 right there. It's beautiful.
That was a West Side problem that, obviously not everyone can relate to.
All right. That's it's pretty fascinating to think about how much of an impact something like that's going to have on the industry. But I think the streaming services are going to evolve because of that, and our content consumption is going to evolve because of that. And we honestly might just ditch all of it and go straight to Twitter or something like TikTok.
Elon would love that.
Who knows? He might go into the live streaming before it's done.
Yeah, that's
all true. Right. So writer strike, that one's easy. Another easy one. Come on. Bob Iger has to find a replacement 2023. There's no, he has 2 years. He has to pick a name.
Yep. So right. So for those of you who don't know, the board and agreeing to bring him on, his biggest task is to identify a successor. His contract only runs through 2024, if I'm not mistaken. So like December 31st of 2024, he's done. So if he's smart, he needs to identify someone this year and then give a year of sort of like shadowing or training.
My prediction is he's gonna choose like a cruise line coordinator, an events coordinator, because why not just pick someone straight out of the blue why pick a qualified person, Keith? Here's the thing.
Good? He chose someone who knew that side of the business, and that was Bob Chapek. Now, remember, Bob Chapek
that was also my joke. Actually, that was.
I know. Bob Chapek also played in home entertainment, so it's really tough to find an executive who can play in both spaces. So to have the entertainment background and also understand the sort of parks aspect of the industry of the business. Now, I think he has a fairly obvious candidate in Christine McCarthy, the current CFO. who obviously was very loyal to him, given her behind the scenes machinations. I just made a word up.
Yeah.
With the board, in terms of her displeasure with how Chapek was running things. So you obviously know the big rub with the last go around with the Bobs was that Chapek wanted nothing to do with Bob Iger. He's like, go away. I don't want to deal with you. So obviously Christine McCarthy would probably run it a little differently and want to work with Bob to sort of ensure a smooth transition. She knows all aspects of the business. She may have to hire somebody to come in who has sort of a better grasp on the creative side of things, because as we know, you come into that situation and you don't have a lot of experience, you're like a bull in a china shop, which is ultimately what happened to Bob Chapek. But I think she could obviously learn from all of the mistakes that Bob made, and also could help cement Bob Iger's legacy, which is
2 years of a runway with Bob Iger. You can
not to mention the fact that she worked with him for almost 15 years, I think.
And she's the
something
CFO.
like that.
What a great time to be bringing on a CFO, right?
Right.
The industry is going to have an economic shift, so why not have a CFO that could strategically?
And the big thing with Disney is the relationship with investors, and so she obviously has a relationship with Wall Street. She obviously has a relationship with all the big investors. You don't last in a job like that and that high profile of a company without having those ability to have those relationships. So she ticks a lot of the boxes. And again, I think the big thing is for Iger, it's like this is his second go around of cementing his legacy. So I think he's going to want to make sure he picks someone who is going to steer the ship through what potentially could be very turbulent times. And I think Christine's the obvious candidate now. Idea. Is there another candidate that's out there outside of the Disney realm? Yes, but maybe, I don't know. But
it's not very Disney to bring out somebody just from the outside and pop them in there, right? It's
no.
You bring them up.
But I would advise, if I were to advise Christine, Miss McCarthy, I don't know her personally, so I should call her Miss McCarthy. I would say, like, as soon as you start looking at your bench and start prepping for who you think should be the next CEO, because honestly, I don't think Christine McCarthy is that young. So that's another aspect of it. I mean, it's a big time job. So she's also I think would recommend that she take a look at her bench and see who is upcoming that could potentially be groomed to be the next successor. And start moving them around the company. Do the old GE model of like, okay, you've spent 10 years working in the studio. Now you need to go work in parks. So you understand that business and sort of play that game. So you start setting up someone who, and set up a bench, because right now Disney has some great younger executives, but they're so siloed in what businesses they perform in that when it comes time to actually take the helm of the actual overall business, they might necessarily have a blind spot, which they can start to rectify now.
And what a great chance to bring in some youth into the leadership, because we've almost been complaining about for over 2 years, is like, it's just not happening. There's too many people in one generation running all these studios. This might be an awesome shift there. That's exciting. So this Disney shift, clearly trying to play the games with Wall Street, CFO choice. I think you might be right on that, Keith. I'd put dollars down on that in Vegas.
Ooh, I like it. I like it.
I think that one. I wanted you to spend 1 minute telling me what you think the Oscars are going to be like in
how so?
Watched or not watched?
The show?
Do you think the ratings will go up? Ratings will go down? Anticipation of we put a wrestling ring in the middle of it? What's going to happen?
Okay, so it's tough. So that's a tough one, because one side of me thinks this could be a better year because there's an opportunity for more popular movies to get nominated. For example, the rumblings are Top Gun Maverick has a shot, Elvis has a shot, Avatar: Way of Water has a shot. All very popular movies. Obviously, Top Gun Maverick, one of the biggest movie of the year currently. Avatar is also doing fairly decent. So there's an opportunity, if you look back sort of when the Return of the King, which is sort of the pinnacle of the Oscars, when that won, Lord of the Rings, obviously it was the biggest hit movie of the year. And then all of a sudden they started awarding all these movies that nobody saw. So that side of it could help, but the problem is they've also gone back to rewarding, presenting all the awards for the entire show. So it's back to being 5 hours again.
Oh yeah.
And until we know whether or not they're going to play with the format, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, honestly. And Unless
my take is that the format change has to, one, somehow, some way they're going to have to address the slap. You're going to have a shadow walking into the show. So choosing the host is going to be the hardest thing to figure out. The no host game is total BS. They have to.
Well, I think they realized that last year.
And if they make Chris Rock the host, it would be the most brilliant move they could possibly make.
There's no way he's going to do it.
Of course not. But wouldn't that be amazing? He comes off as
it would be amazing.
Netflix special, walks straight into hosting the Oscars. We address this thing heads on. You kind of figure out something right there. And then we get into, I think you're right, like the films this year are well received. They're kind of knocking off the whole idea of the OTT platforms and the studios battling each other. I think we've absorbed all of that now. It's like, okay, now we're just talking about content again. And if pop culture or popular films have some influence, yeah, people are going to want to watch their favorite fans.
Well, that's a good point. I never thought of that. All three of those movies I mentioned are all theatrical movies. Not one of them was a streaming play.
Yeah, they weren't coming at it from, hey, let's play a certain game. I mean, I think the Emancipation was the only kind of.
Yeah, Tim, you keep talking about. I don't think that has a shot, dude. I really don't. I don't think that's.
You're saying as best pick. There's 9 best picture slots now. Whatever.
I don't. I thought they got rid of that. I think they're back down to 5 again.
I hope so, because it was so hard to watch all those.
I think last year was the last year of the 9 to the 10. Now it's going back to the 5. I think I could be wrong.
So that's interesting. We're wait and see, but it's something I'm anticipating because it's a carryover. Let's talk about the streaming services. There's got to be something going to happen in the streaming services. What's your big prediction there?
I think Peacock is gonna. This is my big one, and I will be happy. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I think Peacock's going to end up turning off the lights. Either that, or they'll get somebody else will swoop in and buy their content. Perhaps Paramount Plus, maybe. I just don't think they're playing the game, and I think what happened with Bob Chapek and that disastrous earnings call when they lost all that money, and Comcast has to worry about the fact that the people are cutting the cord. They're not, they're still buying, internet, but that's not enough to cover the cost of losing, the cable subscriptions. And, they can't just keep spending like crazy. It's just not going to work. So unless they have some hit within their first 2 quarters, I have a feeling it's either they're going to call it and reassess, or they'll look to some sort of combination.
It's so interesting because
Paramount
Comcast is such a major player. It's such a huge player, and they have to have some sort of OTT presence, or they're basically walking away from a part.
Okay, I mean, yes,
so the acquisition idea is interesting because it's something they could throw out there to create a new kind of partnership. I love that idea of Paramount, because Paramount Plus is doing something that Peacock can't. They can't figure out. And maybe it's because Peacock is just garbage.
And they're already working together overseas. I think Sky and Showtime are in a partnership. So they've already started this sort of playing it off. So it wouldn't surprise me if that ends up going down. I mean, they have a relationship because oddly enough, and some weird, way too complicated to explain on a 30-minute podcast, they have streaming rights to Yellowstone. Peacock does. So there's already that sort of relationship. There's that. I mean, listen, there's also the Hulu component here because Disney has to make up its mind whether or not they want to buy Comcast out. And that could flush Comcast with a little bit of cash to continue playing on original content, or maybe they adjust it and they don't want to do original content anymore. And it's just a streaming service for them to run all their shows from their cable networks. I just don't think Peacock as we know it now is going to exist at the end of this year, to end of 2023.
Well, that's we don't know Peacock. So Peacock that we don't know right now won't exist because
because nobody watches it. Right.
Yeah.
I subscribed to it because I wanted to watch Halloween, and then I immediately canceled it.
what Peacock has is reach. Like it's a very easy platform to plug something into. What they are missing is content.
Yes.
But you think about it, they're a cable network. They're not a cable, Comcast carries other people's content almost agnostically. Like they don't really care where it comes from. The studios use their platform to put something on there. And where Peacock had to compete was they had to start owning their own content. They can't do it. So interesting to go back to that media streaming service that other studios can plug into and get a better reach. Peacock could accomplish that. Yeah, interesting. I like that kind of thought, because I think there's a lot of missing the OTT playing in the field, and there's so much shakeup happening. For example, and the ESPN thing with Disney is just one of the things of like, almost ESPN at one point could have spun off and made its own OTT platform. It was so popular and doing something, and now that whole thing's crashing. So there's another large media force available. I don't know what's going to be bought, sold, traded, leveraged into something. But there's a known brand and known followers. It's just not making money, and it's
there's all kinds of so there's a lot of brands that are underneath the big corporate umbrellas. ESPN is one of them, where there's been talk that there was some activist investors on Disney that were pushing for the ESPN to be spun off. They backed off that complaint, but now I think, given Disney's financial position, it may come back to the fore. There's also the conversation of potentially, again, as I mentioned earlier, what to do with Hulu. There's also, if you look at Warner Brothers Discovery, there's then talk about potentially spinning off CNN, because they're trying to offload so much debt that's another potential. But
these are all, CNN was its own platform at one point too. Like it has
for like 5 seconds.
But think about the strength of it. Just one channel necessarily that became a platform, or could be a platform on its own. Now it's part of a field of other streamers trying to put something together. Yeah, interesting. Wow.
Yep.
There, I think that buying, trading, and selling of something is going to be maybe continue, but I think we're going to see a couple of big moves. Like the Discovery thing felt like traditional large corporation, mumbo jumbo, consolidating things, putting, reducing the number of ultimate brands out there now to, what is it, 4 or 3?
You mean studios? There's 4 now. 4, 5. I can't remember.
Yeah. But that whole, like, just, a larger body of people under one umbrella, where this is kind of like, now that we have all these assets, what to do with them, and the trading and the building up or collecting of them into one platform. Interesting. So Peacock, ESPN, stuff like that. The other thing that OTT needs to kind of deal with is the content situation. If the writer strike is kind of going to put something, slow down the production elements there, or move people to a different kind of format, there's got to still be an ability for an OTT platform to play. And the one I'm thinking about most is Apple. Apple still seems to be the most confusing platform to me, because maybe they just have so much money and they're really just like a woke media stream of like, well, we're only going to make things at cause, starting off with our very first film, the Al Gore documentary, the amazing presence of something new, and we can start getting people to think differently. Keeping up with that, maybe that's just let's make something 1 or 2 films a year and put something out there. But I still think they have to buy something to be relevant. I'm surprised that the Sony deal they didn't buy Sony. Why didn't they just take it over? Sony doesn't have an OTT platform. Apple doesn't have content. The two of them are obviously major tech companies that play in the same space. Maybe that is the rub between the two of them. But I think like 2023 might be the year that we'll see Apple do that.
Yeah, I mean, so I have 2 theories. One, I think the reason I think the Apple Sony thing didn't happen is because Sony is a much better position than it was at the end of 2022 or 2021. Because of Tom Rothman, to his credit, has steered that studio fairly well, much like he did at Fox, to the point where they're making money again. Now, Sony, the parent company, was getting a little nervous because they were bleeding cash. And then Tom comes in and kind of rights the ship. So now they're actually making money again. So I think that's part of the reason why they've decided, okay, we're actually doing okay. So why don't we just play like, as the gun for hire for all the other, they have that deal with Netflix. I think they have a deal with Apple. I mean, they're basically like, we'll go with a streaming service that will offer us the best deal, which is not necessarily a bad idea, because it avoids the pitfalls of having to spend even more money on content to try to populate a streaming service. Which
so basically production as a service. Well, the largest studios, production as a service, getting stuff done.
Yeah. So I think that's partially why, but I do think Apple will probably be taking a hard look at Lionsgate this year. I think that will be If there is a target they are interested in, I think it's Lionsgate. Lionsgate has a very healthy library. Lionsgate is prepping themselves essentially for a sale. So I would argue that that's probably where Apple is going to look. You're right. They are a aimless streaming service. Right now, they have buckets of cash. Investors don't seem to be that concerned about it because they still have their consumer electronics side of the business, although the challenges in China with the COVID lockdowns and the production issues are probably going to start hurting their bottom line as well. So maybe that'll turn the attention. I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. You're having production issues in China, but you're spending $150 million on the next Brad Pitt film. This doesn't make any sense. You need to sort of, at a certain point, the Netflix spotlight is going to shift on Apple and be like, what are you guys doing with this?
Yeah.
What is your strategy here? There's no strategy. You're just throwing shit at the wall and hope something sticks. And for a while, I think Apple was just like, we're Apple. The people just come to us. But they still haven't resolved the fact that most people don't know what an Apple Plus film is, where to find it. So, I mean, and they don't have a library.
Where do you find it? I can't. Unless it's right there, the top banner on Apple TV.
I mean, the problem is they have like Apple TV, and then it's an Apple TV Plus, and there's just consumer confusion around it. Now they had a little bit of a burn with Blackbird, and obviously Coda did well for them, and so they've had their moments, but it doesn't seem like they've capitalized on it and sort of figured out what their strategy is and what direction what their game is. And they don't have a library, and Lionsgate is a library. Lionsgate has some very talented film execs and talented marketing execs. They could bring them in, because right now I think Apple is just a hodgepodge of people from other studios, and there's no real, doesn't feel like there's a direction anywhere. Like, do you know who, like, I know who runs films at Netflix. I don't really know who runs film at Apple. Who's picking the projects over there?
Tim Cook. Are you kidding? At the rate they're making them, he can just choose them. Like,
that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
Given their slow speed and how long it.
Maybe that's the problem. Tim's sitting around going, "Okay, should we talk about a movie? Oh, I haven't read that script yet." Well, don't worry about.
I'd also love to see Apple buy a movie theater. I would love to see what they would do with a movie theater.
Oh, that's so brilliant.
I would love to see, because that Steve Jobs reinvented the store with the Apple Store, and it became like the standard that everybody else was judging how their flow was, the store flow. And I would love to see Apple sort of take that genius, although Steve Jobs, rest in peace, is no longer with the company, that sort of reinvent genius and spotlight it on a theater, buy a couple theaters and experiment, see how it goes.
You're not far off from an idea, because Apple is basically taken over major kind of civic buildings and then turn them into Apple stores. I think about the library in Washington, D.C. Is it a Carnegie Library? I think it's a Carnegie Library in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
These incredible old buildings preserved because they've been turned into consumer
Apple stores
by Apple.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the fall down of the theater industry, and like the actual the theater chain industry, really means, hey, some of these buildings could be rebuilt, like they could be put into something, have an Apple spin to them,
or like you said, like there's one here in Philadelphia. It's a beautiful theater. It's in Wayne, Pennsylvania. It's called the Anthony Wayne. It's got the old school marquee, and it's been closed as far as I can tell since the pandemic. I don't know if it's going to reopen, but that kind of marquee look, you could preserve it, but then reinvent the experience inside, which I would love to see.
The real estate play of, like, you can buy a building in the center of a city, because a lot of people are there. They're basically just shuttered. Apple would have that's what Apple's in right now, is the real estate game, right? They're using the consumer products to buy the best real estate on the planet, put their consumer products inside of there, and people are paying them mortgages.
Yeah.
So why not do that same business plan with theaters? Absolutely.
I would love to see that.
Then they would definitely need to get a studio behind them or to produce something.
Especially since Brian Roberts keeps ignoring me and won't buy a theater, so I'm going to try Apple now.
Yeah. Apple, please buy the theater near Keith's house. He's desperately wants to go back to the movies.
I'm happy to help you design it and work on it, and make it look nice and pretty.
His kids have to watch Puss in Boots somewhere. Can you just make it easier commute?
Maybe I need to send Tim Cook a free case of Vision Craft Brew.
There you go. Now you're thinking. That's what he's missing in his life.
Exactly. That's what he needs.
Well, happy New Year to you, my friend. It's been an amazing.
Likewise.
And this last year we celebrated our 100th episode. I feel like we're quickly on our way to the 200th. If we
keep on this pace, we might hit 200 sooner rather than later.
And some of the conversations we're having and visitors that we're talking about coming up, guests we're talking about coming up on our show. It's going to be an amazing 2023 year. So much happening, and we're going to be right here covering it as much as we love to cover it, because we're just love this game. So
yes, we do.
It's a pleasure to be your partner. And Lydia,
likewise.
Honestly, happy birthday to you. I know today's your birthday. 49 is an incredible year. One of my favorite years. So
she's going to kill you for that. Oh, Tim.
But thank you to Michelle and all the crew that keep us going. Happy New Year to all of you. We look forward to a next year for you all. And next time we meet, Keith, we'll be in 2023. So
2023, let's do it.
Amazing.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you next year.
See you next year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.